Welcome to Wanderings and Wool Gathering, the podcast that pulls back, turns the lens, adjusts its focus, and sits squarely in the round amid all that makes our lives worthwhile. That's a whole lot of verbiage there to simply say we talk about stuff we like. And tonight we're going to run amok in nostalgia and enter the world of music. My name is Steve, you can call me Foggy, and tonight I'm with my boys, Tony.
Hey, you can call me Teabags. And Paul.
You can call me just plain Paul. Or JPP for short.
Just plain Paul. Let's get the show started off a little bit. We're going to be talking about nostalgic things to us. Our history with music, things we've done recently, and things we're looking forward to coming up. Tony, you want to kick us off a little bit, talking about your history with music?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because my history with music is actually always kind of being around music and not able to really do it. So being an artist, I was either artist or techie. I was either helping record or design covers or do anything like that. But music has always been, I think at some point in your life you just get hooked, find out it's a soundtrack, and I just wanted to be around it all my life. And now I kind of find myself trying to dabble in it a little bit with the help of Paul. And so really, yeah, my history is like, I guess also I should mention, because this will probably come up in our podcast, I'm a lyricist at heart. So, I can enjoy a good instrumental, but I always fall in love with the lyrics. So, but just being around music in all of those capacities at least let me kind of sit in the room with the artists, and it's something that I've appreciated then and still appreciate now.
All right, Paul.
Well, music's been kind of in my bloodstream for a very long time. It started off with, as a kid, I grew up on a farm, and my parents bought a Commodore 64. Of course, my mom was using it for database and paperwork and all the not-so-fun stuff, but when you get into the world of games, especially on a Commodore 64, it had particular sounds that were very synth-driven, and they just kind of got me hooked on music in the first place. There was notation software and little things I could dabble with to write my own music. Got a hold of a Casio SK1, started sampling and doing little things there in 5th grade, and my parents reluctantly bought me a guitar when I was in 8th grade, and the main reason they were reluctant is my siblings got instruments and they ended up in the closet, and they just didn't want to see the same thing happen. But, little did they know that I was very driven to want to pursue music. And fast forward through several bands, music school, even, a career in the pro audio industry, I still write to this day. As you can see, I've got some toys that I compose with behind me. And, if I'm not listening to it, I'm writing and recording it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, well, Paul most certainly is the only true musician in this group.
Yeah.
But all of us, I think, fall into that category of becoming old. And so we have a different experience with music than kids today, downloading digital. We actually went to record stores. We bought records. I was fortunate when I was growing up that my brothers always had jobs and liked to spend their money on turntables and receivers and great speakers. So, and I too had a paper route, and we'd buy vinyl records, and we even had some 8-tracks. I remember Bootzilla. That was pretty awesome back in the day. And I remember saving up my money to buy my first boom box, which was great. It had 2 cassette decks, so I could record from one to the other. I remember recording from the radio. You'd hear that one song you've been waiting for all day, and then you'd record it. And it was a great quality copy, just so you keep playing that over and over. And I'm sure all 3 of us made mixtapes for people, for girlfriends, for your pals, whatever. So,
Hey, speaking of the recording off the radio, I don't know about you, but if there's a song I haven't heard in a long time, there are still some tunes that when I hear them, I'm waiting for the DJ to cut in right at the end to start talking about, what else was going on. Or beat caller number 9, don't forget, folks, and all that kind of stuff.
I was talking to Tony about this the other day. Did either of you ever send in the long-distance dedication?
I did.
On Z92.5?
I never sent it in, but I listened to it all the time.
And what's funny is I back in the day, and I'm sure we'll get into how our musical tastes have changed, but I remember sending out like some sort of like Peter Cetera song to like a girl or something. And, then you get jaded by that same girl and you end up with 9 Inch Nails. So, the past kind of winds
quite a
around
leap.
like that.
Oh goodness. Speaking of Nine Inch Nails, this doesn't quite go back all the way to our childhoods, but I think all of us have been fans for a long time. The new album came out recently, and let's kick the show off with a little bit of review of the latest Nine Inch Nails. I think it's only appropriate that we let Tony kick it off because he is the uber Trent fan. So, Tony.
Well, I think Paul might be a close second too. So, okay, let me tie this into nostalgia again one more time. Back in the days when Karma existed in the record stores, we had somebody gave Mary and my sister, which is now Steve's wife, a single "Down in It" by Nine Inch Nails. And at the time, I don't know how you guys were, but you could only really listen to one thing. Like if you're heavy metal, you couldn't listen to rap. It was very segmented, and Down in It sounded a little bit too rappy for me. I was into Metallica at the time. And it turns out that Nine Inch Nails then became my favorite band, after, Trent Reznor became my favorite band after some time. But, that was when you had no cultivation or no reviews, no podcasts, nothing. It was just some cool guy at the record store that knew his stuff and happened to get a single in. So before we dive into that, can we just stay on the nostalgia a little bit? Like, how did you guys find music back in the day?
Paul?
For me, a lot of it was word of mouth and just passing cassettes around my peer group. We would borrow each other's copies of something. It's funny because, man, don't laugh too hard, but my buddy Winston and I in fifth grade were really big into the Fat Boys and Run DMC, and
Same.
So that was actually kind of our first musical performance. We lip synced that in our music talent show when we were in like fourth or fifth grade. So we were still kids, so I'll allow it. But Winston as well. Later that year, I think for Christmas, he got a guitar, and he brought it to school and was showing me Seek and Destroy. I'm like, what is this? I must check this out further. And he brought me a copy of Injustice for All the next day and Peace Sells by Megadeth. So I took them home, and I listened to them on headphones so my parents wouldn't scream and shout, what is that? But it scared the daylights out of me, and I absolutely loved it. It was like, this stuff is intense. And thus the real journey began. And Winston and I, we both had our guitars, and we would get together. We'd learn riffs, we'd write riffs, and we'd start really just digging in. And then our friend circle got bigger, and we started passing things around. And one friend's like, hey, man, you're into White Lion? Well, not really, but are you into Megadeth or Obituary? No, never heard it. Check it out. And next thing you know, like the Maxell effect happened to him. Whoa, what is this? And thus began, our kind of community of a certain genre that just drilled deeper and deeper. In fact, not to get too into the weeds, but at our 10-year high school reunion, one guy that he was always awesome. We never hung out exclusively, but he came up to us and said, I sat behind you in 8th grade and I overheard you talking about Guar, and I had to go check them out because you guys were talking about it, and you guys created my own underground music journey. And I was always obsessed with finding bands that I'd never heard before. So, even to this day, I'm always finding blogs or online magazines that talk about groups that I've never heard of before. That's why I'm so into synthwave and stuff like that. It's not necessarily a predominant genre, but it's something that gravitates to me, and there's a community out there that is completely into it, and it feels like kind of the back in the old days to this day.
Right. That's
cool. For me it was pretty simple because I had older brothers in my house, and so I was really influenced by whatever they brought home. So back in the 70s, got a lot of Rush, which now to this day is still one of my all-time favorites. Cheap Trick, The Cars.
Sweet.
That was huge for me in the 70s. And then, of course, Kiss, Peter Frampton. I mean, all that stuff kind of went through there. And then 81 hit. I'm like 10 years old, 6th grade, and MTV rolls around. And talk about, as a kid, one of the coolest things ever. It was the videos on a loop. Every couple hours you could see your favorite video. And yes, MTV played music videos at one point in time. And but that was awesome when we were middle school. I don't know if you'd really liken it to YouTube necessarily, because you can't really choose what you're listening to. But it might have been our YouTube back in the day. And then from there, it was just what your friends listened to. like Paul said, you share stuff. Somebody suggests something. Somebody brings something to the table, and everybody checks it out. Lots of old school music sharing with cassette tapes, then eventually, CDs and things like that. So, and that brings us all the way up to our Apple Music and Spotify and those kind of things for sharing. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll jump back into Nine Inch Nails then, because I mean, we're talking about all this time, and they've been going since the late '80s. So, I'll preface it with, and I've told you guys this kind of off the air, but this is very hard for me to review this one, because out of his entire catalog, this is the only one that I'm like really having to sit with and try to let it grow on me. And it's the third part of this trilogy that they've put out since Add Violence and Not the Actual Events. But so I don't even really know where to start with this, other than, I mean, since it's part of the trilogy, let me say that the other two was very refreshing to me, because Nine Inch Nails has a lot of different sounds and a lot of different faces, I think, kind of, even though it's Trent all the time. I think he tries to recreate himself. And I've seen this be something that, like, okay, this is Trent not caring again, in the good way, like Trent used to. Just getting in the studio, making noise and having fun. But still trying to keep that story arc in a world where we don't really have concept albums anymore. There's not one track bleeds into the next. We have, like you said, Spotify and Apple Music, and it's click on the track you want or have an ad pop up in the middle. So I think he's trying to recreate that same experience of having a concept album, but in a more digestible way, by having it come out in 3 parts. And this is just happens to be my least favorite of this one. And if I were to pinpoint it, and obviously I want you guys to weigh in on all of this, but if I were to pinpoint it, it's because he tried a new vocal style. And that's something I'm never used to with him. I don't care when he did How to Destroy Angels with his wife and let her take the lead, and he was doing the backing vocals. Or, Trent does sing too. So he screams, he sings, he talk raps or whatever. He does everything. So, but this one sounded like he was trying to be Bowie. And that was real hard for me, because I love Bowie. I love Trent. They were good friends. And he actually did a great job. It just took me out of the normal Nine Inch Nails experience. And that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. I'm not sure. But that's what I pinpoint it to. Music is solid to me. And when he's not switching vocal styles, I find myself liking it. But when it gets to that point, it just feels weird. So what do you guys think? Have you guys given it a listen?
Well, I have, and I think I told you the first time. I think Tony had shared one of the tracks with me before it came out, and I told you I thought it was a little flat. Mm-hmm. Was it Ahead of Ourselves?
Probably God Break Down the Door. I think that was the first one.
Yes, yeah, that's what it was. And yeah, I felt like his voice was a little flat. And then I listened after it came out a couple of times, a song here, a song there, never together. I didn't like it, but when I listened to the whole, I kind of dug it a little bit more. I liked that we had some soft horns in one song and it carried over to the next, kind of made it feel like a cohesive unit. And Tony, I know I've talked to you in the past about this, and for everybody out there, I don't typically make playlists. I don't pick my favorite songs and put them in a list together. I actually, since cassette tapes, made my first 2 playlists probably a week ago. I listen to albums beginning to end. I just think the experience should be what the artist intended, so that's just how I always listen. So I felt like doing that on this record. I felt like it was a little more cohesive. The flatness in his voice, or the change in his voice, which you mentioned, Tony, didn't bother me as much, because it felt like a good, solid piece of music. I enjoyed it this time more than I did on the first initial listening.
Okay, that's fair. Paul?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Steve on that one too. I mean, I see your point as well, and I'm not trying to say this diplomatically, like we're having a heated discussion, but I mean, it's just what I feel like with this response. But it really boils down to, I was taken aback by the vocal style as well. I thought, what? what's going on here. But once I kind of dug into the whole project, and of course, when I'm listening to it, I'm usually multitasking, typing away with the day job or something like that. But it felt more cohesive to me in that regard. One thing Trent always does, I mean, he stays consistent formulaically, as far as, like, if that's even a word, with his formula of writing. So everything has its own hooks, good chorus, that kind of thing. And I felt like he kind of broke away from that a little bit this time around, and it was a lot more abstract. Like especially "God Breaks Down the Door" with the bass line that's just kind of running and nonstop, and the drums are intense and stuff. And it just kind of felt like there was some room for experimentation. Like he felt a little revitalized and wanted to kind of break loose and probably paying tribute to Bowie in some aspect as well. But just really maybe even tapping into his influence of Bowie, where with Bowie's albums, as he got older and his career progressed in the 90s, he was doing a lot more intense experimental stuff that was considered a lot more abstract even from his earlier stuff. So we've seen the journey of Trent from probably some of the unreleased demos that kind of leaked that were more happy and poppy to Pretty Hate Machine. It's on down the line. So to see where he's at in this journey, I certainly have mixed emotions, long story short, but I can certainly respect his path and where he's at with it. It's kind of funny too. One of my professors at Ball State, when I was in college, he was one of my recording professors. He went to a recording studio to take classes at night, and he used to be an engineer for NASA, and he was kind of burned out and wanting to get into his creative thing. Well, it turns out that the instructor for the recording classes was Trent Reznor, and it's very interesting because he said that he was always a quiet, calm guy and really spoke and talked about the concept of recording and taught very well and invited everyone to a show one evening. So he went, and he's like, he was a different person. It turned into this guy that picked up his guitar player and threw him out into the crowd, and I'm glad I sat in the back, and all that kind of stuff. So it's just cool to see that even in through the years, essentially, as he's gotten older, he still has the energy to continue. He hasn't let the industry completely burn him out. He's always trying something.
Yeah. And I think, and it's funny that you mentioned like the older stuff because, okay, I mean, I am kind of like refusing to review this, because I still need to sit with it some more. Because Trent, let's face it, if you did get a hold of those, like if anybody can find like Purest Feeling, which was on the demos for Pretty Hate Machine, it's very happy Trent with saxophone. Fast forward to 2018, here's crooning Trent with saxophone. And, it's kind of full circle in some ways. But having not had that at the time, only having, Pretty Hate Machine into Broken, that was the tone set for me that this guy is not going to do the same thing twice, because Pretty Hate Machine is not Broken. Broken is not Downward Spiral is not Fragile, and so on. I mean, there's a theme or there's a feel to it, but he does go back and reinvent, and I can listen to his soundtracks in a whole different light too. I mean, when he and Atticus do some stuff. So and I think that's my refusal to really review it hardcore, because I feel like it's going to click with me too. Like I'm going to get on the same page with you guys at some point, because if you could go from Pretty Hate Machine to Broken and still stick with the same guy, I probably can get behind what he's doing here. I coming off of the other two EPs, and I know he's calling this one an album, but coming off the other two EPs, like Field on Fire, those types of songs, that's like classic, what I've been yearning for. So I think it's just like it's a cross section of having me have to try to figure out what he's doing here in this last piece of it, and also like give up my own want, what I want to hear for what he wanted to put out, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
But I trust him. And the other day I just heard an unreleased Mad Season track or something, and I was like really looking forward to Lane, being on there, and it was the lead singer for Screaming Trees, who I don't dislike, but it felt out of place,
Sure.
Especially seeing the old black and white Mad Season cover on the thumbnail. It's like I just wanted Lane right there,
Totally.
And so right now I kind of just want like one version of Trent, but I'm willing to give this other one a try. And I have seen some live footage and loved it, so I'll come back and give it like a star rating at some point in time.
Cool. Well, too, it's funny. And there's albums that have hit me in a way where I was taken aback and not really sure how to feel about it. And give it a couple years where I table it and then I come back to it and it's like, all right, this is the right time for me to enjoy this. You know what I mean? Maybe it's, we were just at two different points in our lives where the artist was conveying something and I just really wasn't willing to listen to that. Case in point, I was on a rabbit hole on YouTube the other day on the TV. It was on in the background while the family was doing whatever it was we're doing, just hanging out and stuff. And a Queen tune came on. It was a remix of it, actually. And I told my wife, it's like, I really feel kind of guilty that I didn't give Freddie Mercury a chance when he was still around. I was kind of off in my own vein, much to your point with having the segmented tastes. But, it just hit me at the right way when it came on.
Right. Yeah, no, that's cool. So I'm curious what you guys, if you guys were, Steve, obviously, if you have more to say on it, go ahead. But I'd like to hear what you guys, since you're willing to review it, out of 5 stars, what do you guys give this one?
Oh, man. This is going to be, mine's not tentative. I'm going to give it probably a 3.5 to 4 stars. But I will say it seems to be on a trajectory of me digging it the more I listen to it. Because I haven't listened to, typically you listen to an album 100 times, by the time you're done or more.
Right.
And I'm not even close to that yet. So I think I'm just getting into that appreciation zone. So who knows by the time I'm done. I think it's suffice to say, none of us think that's a stinker.
Right.
That there are issues. I think where Paul was coming from, where we got to meet it, at the right time. I think that's more of the question than, Trent dropped a stinker on us, because I don't think that's the case.
Good point. Paul, out of 5 stars?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4. Where I have my qualms, I really have just the utmost respect for the production value, given it's his fault that you see my background here, but the fact that he just really digs in and goes all out on getting the right sound and getting the right texture and timbre. I mean, look at the Fragile album. It's really kind of his Dark Side of the Moon. I'm sorry, take that back. The Wall. I'm sorry. I'm tired and we're doing a podcast and I'm trying to come up with memory here late at night, but bottom line, it was something that was completely a different step. And this is too, but it comes down to, he really massages the sound so it tells the story as well. And no matter where some of the things that might put a little speed bump in the path for me, there will still be something that, at least I could, when I hear the music, I can see the texture of the album cover. I can see the feel and the colors that he conveys with it in that regard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Steve, I have a question for you too.
Sure.
Because I kind of know where Paul comes from, where he gets liking 9 Inch Nails, and I know where I could like it from because I lived my own life, so it's pretty easy. But you're such a happy guy. But you've always been into cool music too. I mean, ever since I've met you, you were always on that kind of vibe of really open to things. But what so for you, who 9 Inch Nails seemingly in my head doesn't fit for you, but you like it, what makes you like it?
The answer goes back in this case to 89 or 90. I can't remember exactly when your sister came to visit at IU and brought Pretty Hate Machine with her. So that was the first time that I had listened, and everybody on the floor really dug it. It was good stuff. And the follow-up, the weird thing about this, there's angry lyrics, lots of aggression, lots of mood. I just had this conversation again with Marianne yesterday. We were talking about Corey Taylor and Slipknot. And again, why in the world do I like groups with very hateful, mean lyrics? I guess all of us can sympathize with people who've come from rough backgrounds and have that anger, I suppose, why I like it. But I'm not sure. I'm in a bit of a dilemma. All of my tattoos seem to be of bad guys, and most of the music I listen to seems to be angry. So I'm not sure what that says about me, but typically you're right, Tony. I'm a pretty happy guy. But the other part of that is, musically, I'd like to think most of the people I listen to are really strong, and obviously Trent falls into that. There's always a difference from album to album. You don't get the same thing over and over. Paul talked about the textures and all that kind of stuff earlier. I think that's it. I mean, it's just the whole package.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe you just let other people be angry for you. Maybe that's why you're so laid back.
Indeed.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think that there's something to be said for that too. I mean, just to go on the broad spectrum of things is, I think good artists just, people gravitate towards them. Being old enough now and not caring about segmenting who you listen to and who you like, and no such thing as guilty pleasures. Like, I can respect Lady Gaga, for what she does, and I can sit and watch Damien Rice, just a man and a guitar, like capture a whole audience. I can see Nine Inch Nails. There's just so many people out there. I think when they're following their own path and doing their thing and they're true artists, like, you don't have to necessarily feel a certain way. I think that you just respect what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Like just plain Paul.
That brings us to I'd be remiss if I didn't jump in on our nostalgia tour.
Yes.
This summer, my son's 20 years old, and he has been indoctrinated into the music that I've liked his entire life, and luckily he's jumped in with both feet. Huge Smashing Pumpkins fan, huge Pearl Jam fan, obviously loves the classics like Pink Floyd and The Who. So over this last year with him, I've been able to go to Louisville twice. We saw Roger Waters one time, which was an amazing concert. A month ago, we went back to Louisville and we saw Smashing Pumpkins. They played a big 31-song show. It was over 3 hours. It was amazing. And then 2 weeks ago, I was able to take him to Pearl Jam at Wrigley Field. So if I can just get Getty and Alex out of retirement one last time, I can get him to Rush, and then I can die a happy man. So it's been a really cool year as far as being able to share, my childhood favorites and the people I loved growing up with my son. So it's been a really cool summer for me.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a homebody, so I don't get out much as I love music. The disdain that I have for crowds sometimes trumps live music. So,
except
I did go with you to Pearl Jam, which was an amazing
Yes.
experience. And I read somewhere kind of like Wrigley Field is kind of their like second home. Like it's like Seattle, but since Eddie's from near there, and they've kind of taken it over for the years, and you did have that vibe that they really love to be there. I went and saw Tool for the first time, who's one of my favorite bands. I just never seen them live, and that was a great one. So I'm starting to get out, and obviously I'm going to see Nine Inch Nails this year. So it's a great summer into fall for me as well.
Paul.
Nice. I excuse me. I'm much like Tony. I'm a busy homebody with family and such and projects. But I did catch Anthrax earlier this year. They toured with Killswitch Engage and Havoc, so it was a '90s thrash fest with kind of a modern band that loves to play homage to the early thrash. Anthrax is one of my favorite bands in the whole world. I've seen them, I'd say 7 or 8 times at least now, in different iterations. John Bush era, seen with Belladonna back, and actually got to see them with the full original lineup with Dan Spitz in Fort Wayne back in like 2005 or 2006. So it was really cool just to see the various adventures there. But I do look forward. I'm going to try to go to Nine Inch Nails if my schedule allows, and certainly keeping an eye open for some other available dates. And for me with my schedule, it just comes down to, is it an intimate show? Can I get in and enjoy the show without again big crowds? I tend to like that because the band plays on that a lot. I saw Corrosion of Conformity a couple years ago in a smaller venue, and it ripped my face off. That's a prime example. And also too, is it one where I'm budget conscious. I mean, I certainly understand the artists need to get paid, but sometimes if it's going to compromise a car payment just to go see a show, I have to really kind of think and justify it in the grand scheme of things.
I get that.
Absolutely. I didn't mention, but I'm going to go see Ozzy later this year. There was Stone Sour, which I saw Stone Sour earlier. That was great, so I'm really looking forward to that. But there's part of me knows the legacy of Ozzy, the brilliance, the greatness. But there's this other part of me that kind of is curious of what I'm going to get during this show. Which Ozzy will be there? What's he going to look like? I hope it's a good one. Hope he's healthy and can do his thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's a question for you guys. In your time of enjoying music, be it from a kid to now, what's one of the most memorable shows you've attended?
Oh wow. Go ahead, Stevie.
Do you want to go first, Tony?
Oh, you can go ahead.
As with anybody, there are probably 10 shows we could each just name off quickly that were brilliant. But one that I'm so happy that I went to was Stevie Ray Vaughan. I believe it was the year before he died. It was incredible. It was at Deer Creek. We had seats pretty low in the pavilion. He sat on the front of the stage and played Little Wing. It was just an incredible show, and I'm so happy that I was able to see that before he passed.
That's awesome.
Which probably takes that up a few notches on some of the other shows I saw.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I would say, well, like I did not know that Nine Inch Nails was coming to my little college of Ball State, so it wasn't like waiting all this time. It was one of my friends called me and said, "Did you know that your favorite band's going to be at Ball State?" And I didn't. It was back in the days of Spin and Rolling Stone or whatever, and there's just no real good way to know, and there's no way I would think little town in Indiana would be getting Nine Inch Nails. But it was the opens with Marilyn Manson, goes right into Jim Rose Circus Sideshow, closes with Nine Inch Nails, and it was in the 90s, and they had the big screen with the video that was timed to the music. And so I think for me it was just like my first experience of my absolute favorite performer is like right there doing his thing in front of me, And so I had been to other concerts and liked them, but a lot of times it was like kind of festival style or out in the grass or whatever. And so, this had an atmosphere to it. It was dark through and through, obviously opening with Marilyn Manson, but it was just gritty and dark, and it was what I needed in a kind of, not to get too deep into it, but like, I had turned down a couple of art things outside of the state. So New York and, Georgia and stuff like that, places where I felt like I would have been more in with artists, and I kind of settled for Indiana, and part of that was economics and part of it was family. So, I think I always like crave something that's like gritty and on the cutting edge because, I'm kind of tethered, and I do that to myself, and being older now, I don't regret those decisions to stick around here and be around family and stuff like that. But the reason I think it had such an impact on me was it was my favorite artist. It was way out of what you would think you would get from Muncie, Indiana, and then they like showed up and performed. So all in all, that was like probably my best one.
All right, Paul, tell us about your Hanson concert.
Oh yeah. Well, it was bopalicious. Man, I tell you what, I was at that same show. I was kind of torn between talking about that one or the one I'm going to bring up, since it is a contrast from it. But before I do, let me just say, Tony, do you remember after Jim Rose had ended their performance and Nails was getting ready to go on, the sea of people that rushed from the top of the auditorium down into the crowd, and I actually saw a guy drop kick a security guard to get over the gate, and I mean I thought, oh my gosh,
Yes.
What have I gotten myself into? But you were absolutely right. That was like one of the most intense, visual experiences ever in Sonic at that point too. But the show I wanted to bring up just because of the surreal experience of it was a Lollapalooza, if I can talk. It was like 96 or 97. Tool and the Prodigy were the headliners. But it was a fun day because I got to see a bunch of different bands I was familiar with but never really immersed myself into. So I fell in love with Tricky that day. So trip hop was really becoming more apparent in my Sonic experiences. The Marley Family were awesome. But then I went over to the second stage, and there were some little bands playing. It's just a little tucked-in corner, and there wasn't a big crowd. And this band from Japan played, kind of knocked my socks off, and I bought their CD. But then a band called Failure popped up and performed, and it was Les Paul's drop D goodness, just heavy, slow, sludgy, incredible. And after the set, the guys just went and sat at a table, and I went over and I chatted with them and said hello. So I met Ken Andrews, who's gone off to produce some incredible music by himself and for other artists, as well as his lead guitar player. And both of them signed my sticker. And I put it in the CD when I got home, and I put it away and didn't think about it. And then, when I go to college, Perfect Circle's kind of up and coming and emerging. And I pull out the Failure CD because I was in the mood to listen to it, and looked at the sticker, and I looked at the liner notes, and it was Troy Van Leeuwen that was playing guitar with Ken Andrews. So I got his autograph and had no idea who he was, and had no idea he was going to write one of my favorite albums of all time.
It is awesome. So, hey, that just brings us to... what are we listening to right now? We all like to dabble in new things, search out our new favorite bands. So, Tony, what's grabbed you lately?
Okay. Well, I mean, between what I'm listening to by other artists and what I'm listening to in my own headphones, I'm luckily right now working on some stuff with a friend. Wrote some lyrics. And then Clay, your son, his friends, wrote music, and Paul came over here and helped set me up. And so recording a song called Redemption right now. So that's really cool. It's really the first venture into something that I'm concerned about with the production of. And then listening to, I'm really stuck right now on, there's a song called Nothing Personal by Night Riots. It just got some serious energy. It's fun to drive to. And then I'm doing a lot of writing right now, like for some short stories and poetry and different things I'm doing. So I've been kind of listening to When Under Ether by PJ Harvey lately, and it's just like totally depressing. But it gets my head in the space that I need to be in to write. So I'd say Night Riots, Nothing Personal, and PJ Harvey's When Under Ether are kind of stuck in my playlist in the last week.
Excellent. Paul, what's new?
I mentioned synthwave earlier, and that's kind of been something I've been pretty heavily immersed in as of late. For those that may have not have heard the genre yet, it's very driven by nostalgia, a lot of synths, a lot of pulsing bass lines. It just really sounds like you're taken back to 1985 and you're getting ready to either get in the car with Mad Max, or even go on an adventure with the Goonies, but with a kind of a sci-fi flair. A lot of it I listen to for because it makes me feel young at heart. Also too, it just really is something that makes me feel good. Much like I love Nine Inch Nails and the angst and the energy that it provides, but at the same time, some of these tunes just really kind of, with the hustle and grind of life, it really just kind of lifts me up in the right ways. And then, much like Tony creating, I create music on a regular basis and working on a new album. The tentative title is Neon Nova, so it's going to have kind of that outer space science flair, influenced by Star Wars, Star Trek, anything that takes the mind into wonder and imagination.
So do you prefer, you posted a video the other day on Facebook and you were just killing it on the axe. So do you prefer playing guitar more now, or messing with your synth?
To be honest with you, it's whatever the song needs. I've played guitar for over 20 years now, and I've been playing synthesizer for close to 15 in terms of on a serious level. Even though I had keyboards before I had guitars, I was just kind of, they were toys back then. But, now I try to use both of them interchangeably. And now the real challenge is to get the guitar to complement the synthwave songs and not overpower it and turn it into a complete metal tune or anything like that. I want to make sure that it sits nicely, and from a production standpoint, the goal is to really let things kind of be orchestrated, and if I'm visualizing a band, they all have to play nice together.
Sounds good.
And Stevie, I got it.
Sounds like you're recreating Rush from the 80s. I like it.
Let me jump in.
What were you saying, Tony?
Yeah, let me jump in 1 second, because and I do want to get to what you're listening to too, but since Paul mentioned the Commodore 64 and making music and all that stuff, if we put a link somewhere, or if anybody listening can search Just Plain Paul, Data of the East Alkaloid, It is phenomenal, and I'm not saying that because Paul's my friend. Like, I will be on the treadmill listening to that thing, and it just incorporates tons of good sounds, but the production's high, the grooves are great, and like people need to be checking that album out. So yeah.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, and if you do want to check it out, not to be shameless plug guy, but it is on Bandcamp. So just look up Just Plain Paul, all one word, Data of the
it's
East
one time at
Accolade, and you will
Bandcamp.
find
Perhaps we can produce a review for breakthefourth.com.
Yes, we should.
Stay tuned.
Speaking of shameless plugs,
it. Sweet.
we're all.
There's no shame here.
No,
Don't worry
I'm just
about
kidding. I'm selling lemonade down the street tomorrow. If anybody, go ahead, Stevie. What do you listen to?
Here recently, gosh, it's not even recently, I guess, for the past couple of months, listened to a lot of Ghost, preparing for the concert coming up here in a couple of months. Our mutual friend, Jeremy, introduced me, I guess, I don't know, probably last year, to their the album at the time, which was Meloria, and now they've got a new one, Prequel, out. And when I heard the band was metal, I went in with this notion that it was going to be metal, and that is not really what it is. It's almost rock opera. It's the craziest thing ever, with these nameless ghouls and the lead singer's Cardinal Copia now. Previously, had another name, but they play this off, as this big show. I love it. And the music is so diverse. There is some heavy metal. There's a lot of 80s reference going on, especially the newest song, Rats, really sounds like it was pulled straight from the 80s. But then you go to other songs on there with saxophone and lots of keyboards, and it just feels like you are immersed in a big show. It feels like an opera. So I am super stoked to see this concert in a couple months, just to see what this is going to be like, because they're really engaging. And they are the most catchy band. You just cannot help but listen. They're so catchy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And to tie into that too, Ghost is one of those bands that is certainly encapsulating art visually as well as sonically. To your point with saxophone, for those that are interested in the synthwave genre, the Midnight is one particular artist that uses a lot of like the 80s style saxophone with reverb and whatnot, and you feel like you're watching a cop drama when you're listening to the tunes. It's cool. Great. It's fantastic.
I will have to give them more of a listen, Ghost, more of a listen, because I don't know how you guys are, but I feel like I'm aware of a lot of bands, but there's just so much out there. I mean, it was kind of reliant on what your friends had and what you could afford back in the day, kind of kicking it back to the nostalgic factor. And now it's like you can just skip through songs, and I hate that to some degree. I hate that I can just give something 30 seconds and then pass judgment on it. At the same time, I can consume about 4,000 times the amount of music these days than I could back then. So I think it's the trade-off.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty sad that my garage has 3 tubs full of all my old CDs. And every once in a while I'll dig them out because there's an artist that I'm itching to listen to, and it happens to be the one that isn't released on iTunes or Apple Music or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think we've got an entire other show on our former listening habits and where the music industry is going. So I think we will definitely save that talk for another one, because I think that one deserves an entire show.
For sure.
We're going to start a part of our program where every time we do this, we're going to introduce a challenge. And so tonight, I'm going to introduce this challenge, and I'm going to challenge Tony and Paul to answer this. But we're also going to challenge any of our listeners, and you can respond with hashtag a Wanderings Wool Gathering on Twitter. And the challenge is this. I'd like you to think of a singer of a band. I want you to pluck that singer out and put him in another band, or her, him or her, and which band would actually benefit from having this singer in that band, creating an entirely unique new sound that will be awesome. Makes sense?
I love this. Yeah. And then, so are we revealing that on the next show?
We will reveal your answers on the next show, and we will decide which person on Twitter at hashtag Wanderings Wool Gathering gives us the best answer. And that person will win our accolades because we have nothing to give at this point.
No, let's throw something out there. We can do let's do like a $20 Amazon gift card because we can send the code to them from the back and they can add it to their account.
You heard it here, folks. You win the challenge.
That's right.
$20 gift card to Amazon.
Yes. So you guys pitch in $9 a piece. I'll throw in 2, and that person will win a $20 gift card.
Oh, that's awesome.
You drive a hard bargain, sir.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, last thoughts, fellas?
Yeah.
This is fun. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that, thanks for listening, and, please continue the journey with us. We will go through some of the fun parts of music in the past, and, maybe we'll get a chance to share some of the things that drove us crazy about, the misgivings of having to have physical copies and whatnot.
And I think, like Paul said, I hope people do listen and continue to listen. I think, too, what I like about it is no one out there really knows how closely intertwined these circles are and how kind of odd it is that we all know each other and either, have some sort of tied beyond music and all the entertainment things. We're actually friends and come from different places. But, that whole, for me personally, like I love Impractical Jokers and I love Good Mythical Morning and things like that. And I think those people that have been close friends for a long time and are in this world just kind of doing stuff, talking and having conversations, is interesting. So I hope that we can do that at some point too, where somebody like can kind of really hone in on how we interact with each other because, at the end of the day, we're all like just really, really good friends.
Awesome. Paul, where can we find you on social media?
Well, it's typically just the word Just Plain Paul. I'm there on Instagram, so if you want to see snippets of what I'm up to musically, please go there. I'm sometimes on Twitter, usually interacting with the synthwave community, so find me at Just Plain Paul also. And if you want to find me on Facebook, it is JPP Invasion.
Awesome. Tony?
Well, I'm currently setting up some new stuff on social media, so I'll probably do that later on down the line.
Sounds good. And you can find me, Steve. I am Foggy's Pal on Twitter and Instagram. And you can find me at my website. Actually, it's not my website. I'm just helping run it. It's breakthefourth.com. And we cover all things entertainment. And you'll actually find this podcast hosted there as well. So come check us out there. And I hope you guys will come back next time. Don't have the complete show set up, but we are definitely going to review the new Aphex Twin EP, Collapse. It comes out September 14th. We're going to let you know if that's any good. You can actually check out the first video, T69 Collapse, right now. It is a trippy video. Have you guys seen it yet?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to right after this, but the song is on Spotify also. So.
Yeah, the video is really cool.
I can't wait.
Richard D. James will never do a video without his face in it in some way, shape, or form.
He's frightened me before, and that's saying something. So, yeah, as soon as we get done with this, that's where I'm headed.
Excellent. Cool. All right. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.